Now, before I get into this week's topic, I first want to quickly say thank you to everyone who offered up their opinions or advice on what these discussion videos, or as they'll be called from now on, Let's Talk Some Star Wars videos, should be exactly. And pretty much the consensus was they should be a combination of the new and old way, where, like I used to, I'll bring up a specific topic and give my thoughts on it, and then let all of you have your say in the comments below, before then delving into them all in the following week's video. I'll then also be taking a look back at all the other videos from the week and addressing comments or answering questions from them as well, before then maybe ending these videos with any little pieces of news or info from the world of Star Wars. Anyway, moving on to this week's topic, and I got it from a comment left by Theresa Stewart, who brought up the simpler times, or what feels like the simpler times now, when the biggest argument in the Star Wars fanbase was who shot first, Han or Greedo. She also brought up an interesting question about whether or not the Force actually saved Han by having Greedo miss. And love or hate this idea, the novelization of The Last Jedi does imply the Force has some level of conscious thought, when it says of the Force that it had an awareness and a purpose and a will. And in another video I did not long ago, I said that I wasn't a fan of this, that I personally don't like the idea that the Force can perhaps think. I didn't get a chance to go into the reasons then, but I will now. And the main reason I don't like this is, to me, the Force having conscious thought makes it too much like a deity or a god. And one thing I've always liked about Star Wars is the absence of divine beings with crazy or unlimited powers. Sorry, Palpatine. I like the idea that it's just this energy field created by all living things that, though everyone is connected to it, only certain individuals can access and use, almost like a type of magic, I guess. In my view, once you introduce a god or give the Force the ability to think and use divine power, if you will, you cheapen or change the story in some way, because we can now infer certain individuals were victorious because the Force was literally on their side. And yes, I do realize one of the most famous sayings in all of Star Wars is, "May the Force be with you," which does imply you're wishing it to be on someone's side or favor them, essentially. But I've always thought of that as more of a way of saying good luck than I hope the Force literally sides with you and grants you favor. Also, if you give the Force conscious thought, you raise other tricky questions that usually get asked of monotheistic religions where there is one all-powerful being, or in this case, one all-powerful self-aware Force. Questions such as, why didn't the Force act here to stop this person or alter the course of events at this time? Why does the Force allow someone who would wield the dark side the ability to use the Force in the first place? Questions that usually get answered by someone saying something along the lines of, well, God works in mysterious ways. And no, please don't take this as a jab at God or religion. I'm just simply saying that even though the Force is very mysterious, I've always liked the idea that it didn't play a direct role in events, but rather it was the choices of beings in the Star Wars galaxy, and their choices alone, that determined the course of events. And you could of course respond by saying that maybe the Force isn't omnipotent, even if it does have conscious thought, or that it has very little power to actually influence events at all, and that it's more of a conscious observer and little else. In my most recent video about balance in the Force, I compared the Force to the human body, and this analogy seems to work again here. When we get sick, we cannot simply will ourselves back to health. We have an immune system that will fight the sickness, and in my analogy, the Jedi were of course that immune system. But there's no guarantee our immune system will actually prevail against the illness, and there's little we can do to help outside of course, getting rest and taking medicine. We also do not consciously control that immune system in any way, shape, or form. When we get sick, we do not have to tell it to fight that sickness. Rather, it goes about its work with no actual input whatsoever from our conscious mind. Just like the Jedi are, I believe, not specifically told how to proceed by the Force. Yes, we often hear a Jedi speak of the will of the Force, and Qui-Gon says in Episode 1 that if you can quiet your mind, you can hear the Force spoken to you through the midichlorians. But what I think that really is a Jedi is becoming so in tune with the Force that they simply understand when and where action is needed. Again, much like, almost magically from our perspective, your immune system just knows when and where to act when the body is invaded by sickness. One way or the other, if the Force has indeed been confirmed to have conscious thought, which seems to be the case, I hope and think, it still has very little influence, if any at all, over events. I personally just see this as defeating the purpose of what Star Wars has always been about. And again, that is the choices individual beings make between good and evil, or doing what is right or wrong. Once you put someone or something above them, with the power to directly influence events or the choices people make, it makes for a much less compelling story in my opinion. But of course, that's just my opinion, and this is where I'll open it up to all of you to give your thoughts or feelings on the Force possibly having conscious thought, what the scope of that power might be, and how it impacts the way we look at Star Wars. And to me, this is a fascinating topic, and I'm eager to hear what you all have to say on it, and to get more into it in the comments, and of course, in next week's video. Okay, now moving on then to the top rated comment on last week's discussion video, which was actually my own comment, thanks everybody. So we'll give top honors to the second highest rated comment, which comes to us from Mahadra, who brought up the topic of J.J. Abrams and Johnson, and how there might be some unspoken tension between those two, considering what to some anyway, feels like a lack of a shared vision in the story of the sequel trilogy. And as I've said before, even if these two guys absolutely hated each other, they'd never come out and say it. Both have too much to lose when you consider who they're currently employed by, that being Disney, the biggest name in the industry. And I'm not saying they do hate each other, but the idea they agreed on absolutely everything because of what Abrams said about loving the script of Rian Johnson's Episode 8 and wishing he was directing it is a bit far-fetched. I mean, how often do you agree with everything somebody else suggests on any type of creative effort? Now, factor in that these two guys didn't get to where they are in the industry because they lack ego or ambition, and then you have to come to the conclusion that we'll never know just how much they agreed or disagreed about the direction of the story. That being said, one indicator, and maybe the only one we'll ever get, will be what J.J. Abrams now does with Episode 9. Moving on then, a lot of people in the comments took exception to my analogy of comparing the Jedi to police in last week's video, and I certainly get a lot of the points that people were trying to make, that there are a lot of differences between the two. Police in our world are obligated to do such things as respond to each and every complaint they get from citizens, while Jedi of course are not. The main point I was trying to make, however, is just because something might go wrong with, say, your local police department, a big scandal is revealed, for example, doesn't mean your response should be, let's get rid of them forever, and let's do without cops from now on, and we'll be safer because of it. Yes, the Jedi of the prequel era failed, flat out. I don't think there's a real debate to be had there, though one could be had over all the reasons why they failed. However, I don't know that it means you completely throw out the system and then just hope for the best. In fact, that seems like a really bad idea, especially considering they're the only thing that's going to be able to fight and stop the dark side from rising again. You might argue then that even when the Jedi were working, there was a lot of flaws in their way of thinking, and I won't disagree, some of their code does seem a bit sketchy, but if you throw away the whole idea and try to start over with something completely new, whatever you come up with is going to have to be very similar to what the Jedi already were. I just can't see coming up with some radically new system that will work better or be less susceptible to failure and corruption than the Jedi were. Okay, let's switch videos and briefly move on to my story video this week, which was the 5th part of my Masters of the Force series, and I'm just going to answer the top rated comment, which came to us from Space King Vids, who asked, have you ever thought about adding music in the background? And as I answered in the comments, yes, I have thought about doing this. In fact, I'd like to do it or at least try it and see what people think. I've had a friend that I've met here on YouTube offer to do it, or create some original pieces for the stories, but the timing has just never lined up, which has been my fault. As you can imagine, time is always an issue for me, and even though I love doing the story videos, and I don't want to sound like I'm complaining at all, it's not always easy to get a new episode done each week, so that extra element of music would add more time to the equation that I just don't have at the moment. Other things I have considered for the story videos is getting voice actors to play certain parts, and by that I mainly mean having my fiancé voice the female roles. Something else I'd like to do is ask anyone and everyone out there with artistic ability if they'd either like to draw or in some way create images for the stories. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know and I'd be happy to get your work into the stories. Okay, next up, let's get to the video titled Finally Understanding Balance in Star Wars, and there were a ton of great comments on this one, so forgive me if I don't get to yours. Anyway, our top rated comment came to us from Gregory B, and I'm not going to read it because, you know what, he had a top rated comment last week, and I'm beginning to think he's hacking the system. I am of course joking, but I do encourage you to pause the video and read this because, coming from me, someone who really doesn't understand the first thing about music, though I do of course love it, I think this was beautifully said, and it goes to show there are many different ways to explain or begin to understand balance in Star Wars as something that is not just equal parts darkness to light, but rather harmony, and imbalance is anything that would disturb that harmony. And there were also others who had great analogies for helping us understand what balance in Star Wars truly is, two of which used water as an example, which I thought were both fantastic. And I also encourage you to pause and read these as well, but I'm not going to read them because I'm going to try to keep this video at a somewhat reasonable length, and both pretty much speak for themselves and don't require much of a comment from me after you've read them. One comment that I did want to touch on, though, came from Yoda Man, who pointed out the appreciation George Lucas had for symbiotic relationships, which was a theme heavily used in Episode 1. And he talks about in his comment how there is a symbiotic relationship between all the cells in your body, and there are literally hundreds of trillions of them, and how they all come and work together to make a person, and how incredible that truly is. Because on its own, a cell is still remarkable, sure, but it doesn't do a whole lot outside of just existing. But when it works with all the other cells in your body, you get a human being that can think, love, create, and so on. Which, again, is a good way to look at the Force, as each being making up a part of a greater whole, and things work best when these individual parts or beings live in relative harmony with each other. And many people in the comments also pointed out that the Sith are more like a cancer than any other type of human ailment, because cancer is actually a part of you. It is the result, very simply put, of the cells in your body going haywire and doing their own thing, which is pretty much exactly like the Sith, who also do what they will with no regard for the damage caused to the greater good. Okay, now let's move on to a question from Chris Blaze, who asked, Thor, I've been wondering since The Force Awakens whether Anakin Skywalker is still considered the Chosen One. As it was said, balance was brought when the Sith ended, which was the death of Palpatine and the redemption of Vader. Now that darkness is back, is there a new meaning to the prophecy? Perhaps Anakin is still the Chosen One, but the darkness wouldn't be extinguished through him. Maybe the prophecy referred to Anakin's legacy, Kylo Ren. Will the prophecy be fulfilled through Kylo Ren? And this question kind of ties back to the earlier comment about cooperation and a shared vision between J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson, because I do get the feeling that J.J. Abrams was aware and concerned about the prophecy of the Chosen One when he made The Force Awakens, and how this new sequel trilogy could, if you will, kind of render the first 6 episodes of the saga and the prophecy itself irrelevant if 30 years later the dark side had risen again and caused great imbalance in the Force and instability in the galaxy. I mean, if the prophecy of the Chosen One is thousands of years old, which we can only assume it is, and speaks of a balance that would be brought, I'd have to imagine it didn't mean that balance would last only a few years, but rather that it might last indefinitely. Why else make a prophecy that didn't come to pass for thousands of years, only to have an impact a relative blink of an eye on the galactic scale? And I personally think that Abrams including the scene in The Force Awakens where Kylo Ren speaks to the helmet of Vader and vows to finish what he started was an acknowledgement that the prophecy was, perhaps, not completely fulfilled and that Anakin, who I do think is the Chosen One, would still play somewhat of a role in it. I think a confused and corrupted Kylo Ren might not understand what balance is exactly, and thinks maybe if he rules the galaxy, that'll be balance. But I honestly feel J.J. Abrams was concerned about the prophecy, and hence that scene. Moving on now to a comment from Rhea Shanker, who said, very interesting video. I mostly agree with this, except that I feel the Sith are more of an aberration than a natural representation of the dark side. The Night Sisters, for instance, used the dark side but cared for their own people, unlike the Sith who easily betrayed one another. Ventress mentions in Dark Disciple that the Night Sisters touch the dark side, but don't lose themselves in it. I feel groups like the Night Sisters and maybe the Central Isopters and the Kendalo are more representative of the dark side of the Force, while the Sith represent entropy. And I think this is a great comment because it touches on the fact that the dark side is not inherently evil, that it can be used for good in a sense, or for intentions beyond the selfish, which I know seems to open the door for ideas such as the Grey Jedi. And for those of you who asked on how such things as the Grey Jedi, the Bendu, Mortis, and so on fit into the overall picture, well, I'm going to be doing videos on those in the very, very near future. In fact, I was really intending this video on balance to be the first part of a series that delves into all of this, so please look for those in the coming weeks. Anyway, getting back to the comment here. In The Empire Strikes Back, Yoda warns Luke that once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. Luke responds by asking how he'll know the good side from the bad, and Yoda tells him he'll know when he's calm or at peace. I don't think in any way, shape, or form Yoda was saying, if you use the dark side one time, you'll be lost forever. Rather, he was saying, if you start using the Force for your own selfish reasons, if you use it to do what you want out of anger, you will soon lose yourself and find it near impossible to come back. Your desire to fix things and put them as you want, or how you think they should be, will soon spiral out of control, which sounds like a problem a certain other Skywalker had. I think it all boils down to the fact that the dark side requires emotion to use, and the more emotion you have about something, the less likely you are to make a rational decision. This is why Yoda tells Luke that in order to know the good side from the bad side, or the dark from the light, he has to stay calm. He can't make rash, emotion-fueled decisions, or he's likely going to make the wrong ones. And then the only way to fix it is to make more rash, illogical decisions, which is the story of Anakin Skywalker's fall to the dark side, more or less. Anyway, not sure I explained it as well as I'd like to there, but I will be touching on this topic again in future videos. Finally, before I end this for the week, I do want to address the fact that I have recently created a Patreon account and I am asking for people to consider supporting me through it. And initially, I didn't have any real intent to do anything particularly special for those who do support me. And my reasoning behind that was because I don't want people to think or feel like if they don't support me on Patreon, that I'm not going to respond to their comments or questions, or that I won't highlight them in these videos, or whatever it might be. Simply put, if you watch my videos, I appreciate and thank you for that, and would love to talk some Star Wars with you. Whether or not you support me on Patreon is irrelevant when it comes to that fact. However, I do want to offer something to those who do support me on there, so I'm going to do what I always do, and ask for your opinions. What are some cool incentives that I can offer or do that don't make those who don't contribute feel like they're being left out in the cold? If you have any ideas, by all means, let me know. And if you're wondering why you should even consider supporting me in the first place, which is a fair question, well, to be 100% honest with you, it's simply to possibly allow me to do more of this. Because as you may know, I do work a full-time job right now, and I also have a wonderful fiance who deserves a lot of my time and attention as well. But pretty much every free moment I have goes into this channel. And if I'm not doing something directly related to it, I'm usually reading a Star Wars book or comic and trying to keep up on all things canon in the Star Wars universe. And look, I'm not trying to complain here. I love Star Wars, I love doing this on YouTube, and I love getting to chat with all of you about it. I cannot even begin to tell you how much of an honor it is for me to be able to do this. And if I had my way, I'd simply do more of it. A lot of times people ask me why I don't put up more videos, and the reason for that is because I put everything I have, all my love for Star Wars, into each and every video I make, and I only make them and post them when I feel like I've created something worth your time to watch. So if you consider supporting me on Patreon, or if you already are, you have my gratitude and appreciation, and as I said, I'm open to suggestions on ways to truly make it worth your while to do so. But even if you don't support me there, you still have my gratitude and appreciation for watching, commenting, and helping me make this channel what it has become. As I've said before, I don't think of this as my channel, I think of this as our channel. Just like with Star Wars itself, anyone who chooses to be a part of it can be a part of it. I just happen to be the guy lucky enough to give a voice to it all. And for that, I want to just say thank you to everybody. Well, that's all I've got for this time. Now it's your turn to let me know what you thought about this format. If you thought the video was too long or should be even longer yet, maybe much longer to get to many more of your questions and comments. Also, of course, let me know what you thought of what I had to say, or leave questions and comments for me to address next time. Lastly, let me know what you think about Patreon or other ways I can make this channel better, more interactive, or what other types of videos you might like to see me try in the future. I'm always open to advice on ways to improve. Anyway, whatever you want to bring up in the comments, leave them below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.